All right. Welcome back. Episode 100 of the Idols to Rivals podcast. To be honest with you, it's been a struggle. I just recorded a 42-minute long version of this that was, I thought, done decently well. But, these things happen. I recorded it with the iPhone audio and it kind of came out terribly. But nonetheless, we're going to keep going forward and we're going to figure it all out. The day that you're watching this is the 5 year anniversary of this podcast. I started it on January 29th, 2020, half a decade ago. I can't even believe that those words are real. I started it a couple of days after Kobe Bryant died. Was never even really the biggest basketball fan in the world. I just, for some reason, knowing that he had passed and his whole mantra and mentality of just going for it really resonated with me. I saw more clips than I ever had of him practicing, stories about him just being relentless. And I don't know why. It motivated me. I was riding in the car with my mother and my sister to go shopping for something, and she let us know the news from the back seat. I didn't believe it. Again, didn't grow up with Kobe being, my idol. Played basketball for maybe a year, was terrible at it. And so I don't know why that motivated me to start this podcast, but 5 years ago, half a decade ago, I did. A month or two later, COVID hit, stopped the world, and everything really changed from there. And pointing out the obvious, it's been 2.5 years since I uploaded my last episode, episode number 99. This episode's been a long time coming. There's been a lot of back and forth in my head mentally about when to upload it. I wanted to upload it the next week. I had gone almost 2 full years uploading every single week, even when I had nothing to talk about, and just interviewed my friends about useless bullshit, which was fantastic. Some of my favorite episodes. And then I thought maybe the year anniversary, I'll do it. And then I thought for sure the 2 year anniversary. So I made this note for episode 100 on September 15th of 2024, saying, hey, 2 year anniversary. I haven't posted in 2 years. Missed that by a mile. And then I realized I checked Spotify and realized that this episode will be on the 5th year anniversary of this podcast, which is so unbelievable. And I wanted this podcast to be the best version it could be. I have the upgraded camera. I hope you notice if you're watching on the video version. And the microphone has been a nightmare. I had to record it, like I said earlier, on my iPhone. And then I tried it on a microphone. And now we're just recording off the laptop. So we're going to see. I'm going to go through this whole thing. And if it doesn't sound good, that's on me. We'll figure it out. And maybe we'll record again. But if you're watching on the video version, you may notice things have been a little bit different or look a little bit different. Last time I was in a cramped little dark room, and now have my own place. I have my own place in downtown Miami. I love it. It is the place that I said I always would have, that I told everybody when I moved down here that this is what I wanted to achieve. And thankfully I got it. I love it. I love the location, living on my own. It's almost exactly how I drew it up. It's shocking. It's really weird. And every now and again I'll turn out all the lights and you can kind of see down into the city, and it still doesn't feel real. I lived here for a little bit over a year and a half and it still hasn't hit as hard. I still can't grasp, I can't capture that moment of presence like I want to. So I take photos, but it's just, even when I stop and stare right before I'm about to go to bed, I still can't grasp it. But a lot's changed. A lot has changed in the 2.5 years that I haven't recorded a video. And I didn't know if I ever would. I didn't know if I'd come back to it. I never did this obviously for fame or I guess attention. You have to if you want people to watch it. But this was more selfishly a reason for me to vent, to say things that I've never said before. And it's a weird way of doing it. It's a very 2025 or I guess 2020 way of doing it. Opening up to a fucking computer that's going to be there for the rest of your life and the rest of your family's life, as long as, the internet's around. But that was the way I found solace. That was the way I found peace in doing it. Maybe saying things that I wouldn't say to people in person, or having some reservations on what I would say. This was, again, as weird as it is, the format that I could actually say shit that I wanted to say. And so that's what this is here for. Um, it's for that one person. Again, I just recorded this for 42 minutes. So I didn't want to do it to begin with. I waited 2.5 years. I postponed 2.5 years, and it makes me nervous. It makes me nervous about posting these things, about, getting super personal, talking about issues, talking about struggles. But it's really for that one person, whether it's myself down the road. It's really for that one person who needs it, who needs to hear that they're not the only one struggling with stuff. Some things may be going great in life and some things may be, lacking. And that's kind of what I'm here to talk about. So yeah, I've been in Miami for a couple of years now. Have a completely new job in a different sales role. No longer doing mortgages. I got out at the perfect time, thankfully, whenever rates started to rise, and seemed like they'll be coming back down, but got out at a good time. Right when we left off in September of 2022, which is so wild to say. I started getting into promoting. I was promoting at some clubs. I had zero money at the time, so I had reached out to some people that I had met or ran into or saw on Instagram, and I figured, how do I get into clubs with no money, and how do I meet people? And that was the way to do it. So it wasn't a great promoter. I had a lot of fun, met some cool people, got to see some cool events, got to talk to some celebrities, bump into them, Ski Mask, Gucci, met OJ Simpson. That was a weird one. Um, but yeah, it was cool. It was a fun time. It's really tough whenever you have a 9 to 5 job, or in my case, I'm on West Coast hours, so for like 11 to 7 hours. But it was a lot of fun, and from Friday to Monday morning working, right after you finish doing your normal work was tough. Couldn't keep up with it. Was just doing shit at both jobs, and I was just doing it more for fun anyway. So ended up stopping doing that around December of 2022. And yeah, it's been a crazy, crazy ride since then. And what really kind of sparked it all was I went to LA in December of 2022 for our first work party. And one of the things that kind of stuck out to me was, everyone's crushing it in their career. Everyone's got, looks good, doing great, knows everybody. I was new to the company. I didn't know anybody. Sat with kind of the older crowd, didn't really speak to the younger guys that much yet. I'd only been in the business a couple months, and I was confiding in the guy that originally brought me on and convinced me to take the role, which I am forever indebted him to. And I was talking about how I was jealous, how he had, the perfect wife, perfect life. And he's like, "Oh, you'll find it. Don't worry." And, the next day went out to a bar and met this girl, fell head over heels, and flew her out the next week. And we went engagement ring shopping the second day. And as fucking crazy as this sounds, I still can't explain it to this day. Um, yeah, that was a pivotal moment. We didn't end up lasting through the new year, through 2023. And a week before we were shopping for 3 carat engagement rings. And it was an interesting time. I at the time thought I had fallen in love. I thought it was perfect. It was I met my girl in LA, and we're just gonna live this bi-coastal perfect life. And it didn't end up shaping out for that way for whatever reason. And so that, for a long time, was my motivation. That's what I thought about forever. I wanted to work harder, make more money. I wanted to get in better shape. I wanted to do everything, live the biggest life I could, because I was upset that that had crumbled and crashed and burned. And I don't know why I felt that way. Every time I talk about it, I know it's insane. It sounds wild to say out loud. I've only told a couple of friends about it, and that really kind of started my motivation on going into this deeper journey. And this was, again, a few months after I had filmed my last episode of the podcast, and that was what really sparked everything. 2023 was a massive year. I went to the NBA finals. I actually ended up going to the NBA finals the next day, the Stanley Cup finals, and then another NBA finals game. Unfortunately, both teams, the Miami Heat and the Florida Panthers, ended up losing their respective championships. That was a massive fucking bummer. I thought I was the bad luck charm. Didn't really care about basketball. It was cool to go to the event, cool to see the celebrities. McGregor was there. Floyd Mayweather's always at the games, iced out of his mind, and it was cool. It was cool to be a part of those. Get it 2 out of the 4 major championships out of the way. But again, the home teams both lost those games, so I figured I was the curse. But this year, I got to go to the first game of the Stanley Cup championship. Florida Panthers ended up winning in Game 7. I did not go to Game 7. I have this horrible superstition that if I go to the games, that they will lose, even though every game that I went to in the Stanley Cup championships they won. I just figured I'd rather have them win a championship than be their person. And it ended up working out. So it's pretty much all my fault. You're welcome. But it's good to see the Florida Panthers winning, and hockey is quickly becoming the number 2 behind college football of my favorite sports. I am in love with it. I was at the banner raising ceremony. If you haven't been to a hockey game, an NHL game, minor league game, whatever it may be, make sure you go. It is one of the best sporting events you can possibly go to. It's cold, so you can wear some jackets, you get some food. It's a small arena, even in the NHL. You feel like you're in a video game. It's not like the NFL where you're a fucking mile and a half up in the cheap seats. The cheap seats are actually good at NHL games. So yeah, that was great redemption. I finally got to go to the Miami Grand Prix. Again, if you can go to one, go to either Miami or Austin. I've been to both. They're fantastic. I missed the inaugural race. I had zero money at the time, and I'm still upset about that. But I got to go to the race 2 years ago, and I will be going to the race this year. And again, F1, wherever you can go in the world, it's everywhere. Make sure you can go. It's expensive, but it's a good time. And yeah, so those are kind of the big events that have happened. Like I said, last time we spoke, I just moved to Miami, um, and it was a big shift. It still is a big shift. Even 2.5 years later, it still is a big shift. I think I got super lucky when I moved to Fort Lauderdale. I was in a building where it was rent by room, so everyone was kind of in the same boat. We were all strangers. It was very conducive to meeting people, whether it be in the gym, whether it be in the elevator, out at the bar. That was the most popular bar, was at the bottom of the building, so it was a great way to meet people. And a lot of people that I had met that hadn't gone to bigger schools, it was their first time in kind of that college environment. Pulling the fire alarms, passing out in the hallway, pulling the fire extinguisher, whatever it may be. That's how the whole building was. 40 floors of it. We all had jobs. We made shit money, but either way, you had enough money to call an Uber and go to the bar and buy a couple Coronas. It was a great time, and I made some of the best friends that I could have possibly. And it was only probably like 8 or 9 people, but it felt like 50. We knew every bartender. We knew every door guy, security guard. We cut every line. It was fantastic, and I'm happy I had that year and a half, 2 years in Fort Lauderdale. And moving down to Miami, as moving to any other city is tough. I unfortunately lost a lot of those relationships that I had in Fort Lauderdale, and moving down here was a big shift. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to post this video and this podcast episode, in fact, besides wanting to hit that triple digit, hit 100, was you know the loneliness that I think a lot of people have, whether it be, you live in at your parents' house, or you just moved to a new city, or you've been in a city a long time and things just aren't meshing. That's real. And that's something that I struggle with currently. And a lot of people don't want to admit that. And, some people don't have that problem, and they mesh with everyone, and it goes well. Or maybe, that's just your perception of it. And that's what I've found recently, is in kind of retrospect, of what the biggest problem that I had was I was going into it thinking that I was the only one that was struggling with this. And then, do a little bit more research, and you find out, that perception isn't reality. Maybe you aren't the only one struggling with it, or you see somebody with a ton of friends and they've lived here forever. That was a big thing that I had. Everything's swinging their way. They've got all the friends in the world, but then you realize they've been here since they were in pre-K, and they've known everybody, that they've been hanging out since the first day. I think a big thing, again, that I struggled with was chasing after any sort of relationship I could find, whether that be a romantic relationship, whether that be a friend group, any sort of connection I could have, because I'd gone from a place in college, didn't have a ton of friends in high school. And those of you that knew me in high school can attest to that. Didn't have a ton of friends in high school, but in college, it was that sort of situation where you were in class with people. Everyone was in within, a few years of you. Everyone was kind of on the same page. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. This is the degree my parents told me to get, or this is the degree I think I should get. And then we go forward. Hey, do you want to drink after? Sure. Hey, do you want to go play intramurals? Sure. Join a fraternity. You immediately have, 100 friends. And the real world didn't play out like that, or doesn't play out like that. And so it's easy to chase after that when you think, whether it be you think that you deserve it, whether you think that that's how the status quo is. That's what I thought. I figured, in the professional world, you walk around town, you meet people that are of like mind, of in similar positions, and bada bing, bada boom, you have a big friend group. And I got lucky straight out of school. Whenever COVID happened, I moved down to South Florida, and that's exactly what I got. I got people in the same boat, same age, same sort of hustle, same sort of grind. We had no money. We wanted to make things work. And so it did. It ended up being, great friendships that we had for the time that it lasted. But moving to kind of a bigger city, it hasn't been so much like that. And I've spoken with my friends in New York, I've spoken with friends in LA, and I don't think it's only a situation where it is in those cities. It may be amplified, it may be just because the numbers are a little bit bigger. And, when you're surrounded by 4,000 people your age as opposed to 3 million people your age, it almost feels lonelier. It almost feels like you're fucking up even more because you have so many more opportunities to meet people. When you don't, when things aren't clicking, then it feels like you're failing even harder than if you're in a smaller town or a smaller city, what have you. And so that was the trap I kept finding myself in. I kept trying to chase after friend groups that, you know maybe weren't interested in either having me a part of them, or I was a square peg in a round hole, or I was faking something to try to fit into those. And that became a thing for a long time, for multiple years, of just like the tiny stuff, the stuff that you kind of compromise yourself for. Not anything crazy like you see in a Disney movie where they're like, "I'll go steal that fucking gun from the police officer or whatever to join our group." It's the tiny stuff. It's agreeing with people that you don't agree with on something just because maybe the group's going for it. It's the maybe laughing at a joke that you didn't find funny. It's all the minutia of these interactions, and they add up. And I always thought, even talking about this sounds odd and childish, but that's what it was. That was, losing yourself in the chameleon aspect of it, of trying to fit in just to find those connections, because, loneliness fucking blows. And everyone does it. Everyone has those times. Everyone has those chapters and those seasons. And that's the season I'm in. And I've come to terms with that. A lot of people, I think, are in similar boats. And I think the one thing not to do is to dwell on it. I have made some great friendships, but it's adjusting expectations, and it's improving yourself. I realized that these friendships don't grow without any work. That was a huge mistake I had made, was not reaching out to people. There was a joke between all the friends I had in Fort Lauderdale that was basically, don't text or call Jack between Monday or Sunday through Thursday, because he's not going to answer. And then Thursday night comes around, I text everybody and spend the next 72 hours with them nonstop. Crash on their couch, they crash on my couch. We'd go out, we'd have a time, hit the beach on Saturday, go to elbow room, and then we'd just have a time. And that would repeat for like 18 months. And I realized that that's not how relationships work. You got to reach out to people, you got to check in on people, you got to give them a call. And that was something I had done well with my family life, but never really had to do with friends. Friends were always the people that lived in my, roommates, or lived down the street, or again in my class, in my fraternity. So I never had to foster those relationships. And, call it growing up, calling it, putting your fucking big boy pants on, whatever it may be. That's real. You got to reach out to people. And a key thing that I never thought about, that I never, in a different headspace, in a different time, as a weaker person, I never would do, was ask for help. Whether it be, can you drive me to the dealership to go pick up my car? Or, hey, I need help with this recipe. Or, hey, do you know a good realtor? Whatever it may be, I never asked for help. I thought that was the biggest sign of weakness. I thought that was the worst thing you could do, was, Mr. I've got everything on lock, I've got everything under control. And that couldn't be more of the opposite. Even reading, the the books on psychology or social engineering is not the word I'm looking for, but social interaction, social connection, social building. This is kind of the sectors that I like to read about and learn about. And, and if you're listening to this, I'm sure you're the same way, is just evolving yourself as a person. And so social interactions, social dynamics are part of that. And of course I learn about it now, but asking for help is a way to build a stronger relationship with somebody. Asking for something is a way to improve relationships as opposed to the opposite. I was always afraid to ask for help, but I'd be the first one to be, hey, you need this, or hey, cover a tab at a restaurant or a bar, and try to kind of buy my way through things. As just things started to turn out. And that was never the way I met people. That was never the way I built strong connections when I didn't have, two pennies to rub together. So why would that change now? And it took a lot of time, a lot of internal reflection to realize that that was a huge problem. And that was something I continue to work on to this day. And the more I look into it, the more I research, the more you shine a light on these monsters, whether it be making friends, changing career paths, breaking up with your girlfriend or boyfriend, you know, selling your car because you don't have funds, whatever it may be. As soon as you shine a light on that monster, getting your health under control, it makes that monster, that dragon, shrink. Even if it's just a little. It's normally a lot, but once you kind of put a spotlight on what that demon is, it gets a little less scary. And so, who is this for? What's the point of coming on this podcast? Well, one, wanted to get to triple digits, had to get the 100th episode. And two, just for anybody that needs it, whether it be myself in the future. Like I said, this is a place where I go that I can look back on and see, what I was feeling at the time, what I was learning, express things that maybe I wouldn't express to somebody in person, or say something that has been in my mind, but then now saying it out verbally, changes the way you think about it. It changes the way you learn it. It helps you realize things in the weirdest way possible. And I've never been to therapy, but I imagine it's something to the similar vein. So it's the reason that, I recorded this podcast. It was, the one person that needs it, whether it's myself, whether it's, maybe my kids in the future, or just somebody random that has no idea who I am, hearing that it's completely normal and that there are people that look like everything's together, but there are aspects in everybody's life that you don't know about. And a great saying or line of thinking that I've heard is, if you threw all your problems in the middle of the room with everybody else, you'd grab yours and leave immediately, because you don't know what's going on with people's lives. And so it's easy to get in the negative. And I don't want it to be like that. I want this to be a message of, hope, a message of self-improvement and going forward. And with that, one of the biggest things I wanted to end on here was, I've spent a lot of time these past 2 years in Los Angeles. I've been able to crash my buddy's couch, James, who I met up in Fort Lauderdale. Shout out to James. And it's one of my favorite places on earth. It's a place I've considered moving. Taxes and the legal status is kind of a nightmare, but that's neither here nor there. The 3 miles from Marina Del Rey to the Fairmont and Santa Monica are my three favorite miles on the planet, and I love it. I spent 2 months there this year, and then I spent about a full month of 2023 there. And every time I go, I love it. And a buddy of mine, Bryce, pointed out, maybe you're in vacation mode. Everything seems a little greener when you're there for a short time. You're kind of rushed to meet people, you're rushed to go to events, to try new food, and maybe that's kind of clouded your vision. So I try to bring that back. I try to spin it and bring it back to, where I'm living now in Miami, and thinking, trying new restaurants and going out and texting people I haven't texted in a while. And maybe they respond, maybe you meet up and do something, maybe they don't, they leave you on red and nothing happens about it. Being okay with that. And the biggest change I think that occurred with that came after I was in LA for all of December. I flew back home to spend Christmas and New Year's with my family, and I found out Joe, one of my best friends, had passed away Christmas morning, and it was tough news. I've been to, at 27 years old, I've been to more funerals than I have to weddings of my friends, which is a shitty, shitty stat, but it's what's been real to me. That's the life I've lived. And so with that comes some things of retrospection and, knowing what grief is and the stages of it. And a great thing, I don't want to harp on it here, but a great thing I heard was, grief only happens in the presence of others. for a long time, losing people growing up, I would grieve silently. I'd grieve alone, and really grieving in front of others is where it's felt. And that's the only true grieving. And so if you're going through something tough, is as hard as it may seem to express that in front of loved ones, that's the way to get through it. At least that's what I found. And there's a lot of things you can say about Joe. He was one of the only friends I had, true friends that showed up and showed out during Fleet Week for my birthday, and I'll never forget that. He is a maniac to say the least, among other things, but he's truly and utterly himself. At his funeral this past 2 weekends ago, there was about 300-400 people that couldn't even fit in the entire venue, and so no matter what you call him, maniac, wild, asshole, arrogant, great dude. He's all of those things, but he was himself. And that, with combination with the holidays, I don't know about anybody else with the holidays, you get very introspective, and every time that calendar year flicks, it seems like it goes a little bit faster. And I know it's a very emotional time for me, and very emotional time for a lot of people. And so those combined, it kind of, I like to say it, I went from, in black and white, living in black and white, to living in color now. And the biggest thing I'm taking away from that is loving yourself. Been outer focused for so long, and that's what this podcast was about, and will continue to be about for the most part. Is the goals, financial goals, net worth, health goals, societal goals, things like that. Everything outwardly focused. Um, but the one thing that happens when you start achieving some of those goals is you have time. You have time to look in the mirror. You have time to inspect who you really are. And so when you're chasing things, when you're chasing love, when you're chasing money, when you're chasing success, you know, you can get kind of blinded to who you are as a person, and who you truly deep down, what you think about yourself and how you feel. And so having some goals been achieved, and having some time to look inward, I realized there's some cracks in the foundation, some deep cracks in the foundation that I need to work on. And it's a beautiful thing. I never thought I'd be saying that. Every podcast, every audiobook I'd listen to, I would always skip over, find inner peace, conquer from within, which is now one of my mantras that I try to keep at the front of my mind. And loving yourself. Anytime that would come up, I'd skip that chapter in the book. I'd move forward 10 minutes in the podcast, whatever it may be. I always thought that was, really heady, frou-frou, bullshit. I always wanted, how do you take more risk? How do you conquer fear? All these things. And those came somewhat naturally to me, giving up whatever may be commonplace or whatever may be safe to go into the unknown. I loved that. I always loved the unknown. I always loved winging it. My favorite place is when my back's against the wall. And so those things came naturally, but I would always feed on those outwardly extending, those, taking from the world, as opposed to going inward internally and finding out who you really are. Um, and a big thing was, if you don't believe you're lovable, then, you're never going to let somebody see the real you and let them love you. And so whenever you're chasing and chasing and chasing, it gets further and further away. And it's such an oxymoron. And, everything in life can be put more effort in and you get more effort out, but there's some things that you just have to let be. And so really, I encourage you to take a moment, even if you're really good at it, and just look at yourself and accept who you are, figure out your flaws, figure out your strengths. And like I said, it's weird saying, but I'm happier than I've ever been, and I'm kind of seeing clearer than I ever have about how important that is, about just being truly you. And there are so many fuck ups, there are so many things I can improve on, and I try to, and will continue to try to. But there's some things I'm good at. I've never been able to say that out loud. I always thought that was the soft way to go, or weakness, which is so backwards. And so I always figured, to just extend, what can you take from the world, what can you achieve, all those external goals, as opposed to going in and really finding out, hey, who are you, who do you want to be, what do you dislike, what do you like about yourself, but just being you. And that's something that has been a complete shift in my entire life, that's only really happened recently. And so I think that's another one of those motivators that made me record this episode after 2.5 years of not filming, which, by an outsider looking in, everything's been going great, and for the most part it has. I'm blessed for that. But I really just wanted to make this for myself. I wanted to make this for my future self to look back on and say, hopefully, that was step one in an even better direction, or for, again, the random person that doesn't know who I am, that just needs to hear this is all normal. I'm a 27-year-old guy that that's just trying to figure it out, and focusing on the footwork, focusing on what I can do. Another thing I've been learning, and something I've held at the front of my mind is, being outcome agnostic, focusing on the internal, the habits, the things I can do, um, and not focus on the outcome. Nick Saban said, trust the process. Got to throw a Nick Saban quote in. Missed that guy, but yeah, not focusing on the outcome, the footwork, the progress. What can you do for yourself? Keeping that word with yourself is the biggest thing. That's how you build confidence. That's how I built confidence and continue to. Every little win you get for yourself, whenever you trust your own word. If a friend were to tell you, let's meet up, and you never did, and you flaked, and you always backed out or lied or whatever, you wouldn't trust that person. So when you do that to yourself, hit the snooze button. Don't show up at work and really give it your all. Don't go to the gym. Don't eat right. you know, mouth off to somebody or be rude to somebody whenever you're in the heat of anger or something like that. Keeping those promises to yourself is where that confidence comes from. And it took me a lot to realize that and really get those words to sink in. And a quote that I wanted to leave this kind of section on was from the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's when you have to shoot, shoot, don't talk. And I think that is just all about when it's time to go. There's all the planning, there's all the thinking, there's all the hopes, there's all the dreams. But when it's time to pull the trigger, you have to go. You have to take action. And whether that be a new job, whether that be asking the girl out, whether that be quitting the job or moving or giving it all up and starting over for something that seems completely out there, it's time to make that move. Or, as I've come to find out, turning inward. It's time to look in the mirror and figure out who you want to be and who you want to create. And again, whether that be from getting older, and these things just happen to everybody around this age or at different ages. This is just kind of the epiphany that I've had, and I wanted to share it with somebody that hopefully can get some value out of it. Um, and I want to thank everybody for listening. I looked at some stats. It looks like there was about 32 or 42 countries, people that listened, about 58% or 48, 51% male, 59%. Jesus, it's about 50-50 male female audience, and probably mostly my mom and other female family members. But I appreciate everybody for listening. I can't believe that the first episode was uploaded half a decade ago. A lot of things have changed since I was 22, and a lot of things will hopefully change when I'm 32. So just focused on that. And I don't know the future of this podcast. This format will not continue. I again apologize about the audio. It's been an absolute nightmare filming this, but I hope the camera looks good if you're watching the video version. And yeah, this won't continue with the every 2.5 years an episode, or else we've only got a few episodes left. But what I'm going to focus on here in the future is more content on watches and jewelry. The dream is to get in the jewelry industry. If you know anybody, please let me know and connect. But that's what I've noticed, that's truly what my calling is, and taking that leap. Went back to the Smithsonian over New Year's, and saw this book that I'd known I'd had about, emeralds and sapphires and things like that. And I knew the second I saw it, I knew that I'd had it for years. And I realized that maybe all these things that I've been looking at for the past 5 years come from a deeper rooted thing. I like shiny shit, and I don't know why, but I want to try to pursue that and go forward. And biggest thing is, building a life. Talking about buying houses now, as 3 years ago, I didn't have enough money to pay rent. And so now we're talking about buying houses and, discovering myself and, falling in love, hopefully. And so these are all the goals going forward. And so I hope you have everything that you're equipped with to start looking for that. Or if you found that, congratulations. Or whatever stage you're at, somebody else is there, and it's tough for everybody. That's just the way it goes. And just take some time. Take some time to look inward, figure out who you want to be, where you want to go, and then fucking get after it. And I appreciate you guys for listening, and good luck.